Farmview with Kieran O'Connor on WLR.
Brought to you by GlanviaConnect.com.
Well, as usual, it's Kieran O'Connor here with your weekly farming programme. Once again, I have a very busy show for you. This week, on this week's programme, with silage season in full swing, we have a farm safety special in which I feature reps from Waterford IFA, Community Air Ambulance, as well as Macra and Fermie. And I'll also hear from a father about his son's very serious farm accident last year and about the trauma and impact it caused. Plus, we hear about the EU's Common Agricultural Policy CAP deal being off the table as negotiators fail to strike a deal. And plus, as always, we'll have our farming calendar.
Farmview with Kieran O'Connor on WLR.
With GlanviaConnect.com, Ireland's biggest online farming shop and more.
Well, as we discussed on last week's programme, silage season is well underway. Well, the IFA and Road Safety Authority are calling on all cyclists, pedestrians and drivers to be conscious of this when they're on country roads. Well, Chairperson of Waterford IFA, Kevin Kearsey, expects more people and indeed more machinery on the roads over the coming weeks. And he's urging the public to slow down and watch out for tractors and trailers exiting fields.
Coming into the silage season, contractors and farmers will be out mowing grass and hauling grass back to yards on a more regular basis. The weather has been slow and grass growth has been slow over the last number of weeks. There'll be even extra pressure on farmers and contractors now to get this work done. People from rural and urban dwellers have been locked up effectively for the last couple of months. They will want to get out more on the roads, particularly on nice sunny days, sunny weekends. They like to get out, go to the beaches and go to the mountain, wherever. Come the last week, 10 days of May, and in the first 2 weeks, 3 weeks of June, it's when you get maximum grass growth on the farms. We harvest that grass and put it away for winter feed, what we call winter fodder, for silage, and that feeds the animals over the winter. So this is why it's a particularly important time of the year for farmers, and that's why what we call the first cut of silage.
The Irish Community Air Ambulance and Macra and Fermie have launched a joint campaign to appeal to all rural communities to exercise care as activity in rural Ireland increased during the summer months. A busy silage season, increased traffic on the roads and more children moving about our farms all combined to present an increased likelihood of serious accidents. Stats from the Community Air Ambulance show the summer months are the busiest for the HeliMed service, with the highest number of call-outs during 2020 occurring in July. Well, at the launch, CEO of the Community Air Ambulance, Michael Sheridan, said the Irish Community Air Ambulance works in partnership with the National Ambulance Service and is within 30 minutes of flying time from any location in Munster. He also said that their crew is ready to respond to every call.
We work in tandem with the National Ambulance Service, so if somebody happens to be unfortunate enough to be involved in a farming related accident or an accident in rural Ireland, it's road crew that come from the National Ambulance Service, but depending on the type of injury, the location, the need to go to hospital, we can be tasked as well. And we really don't want to be landing in somebody's field and bringing them or a family member to hospital. It's just being mindful and careful when you're doing something, just to be sure that you've done everything you can to reduce the risk of something happening that would cause you injury or harm.
While also at the launch, John Keane, President of Macra and Fermie, spoke about the importance of the Irish Community Air Ambulance.
Being here today, it has really brought it home, the importance of the Irish Community Air Ambulance service. I think communities right across the southern half of the country are really lucky to have such a service and such a team of volunteers here who are willing to help. And I think the oncoming impending of the silage season, the pressures that there are on farmers, I think it's really important that safely farming and farming safety is hugely important, but also to note that, and we're hugely glad that the service is here and available to us.
Well, to continue our piece on farm safety and the importance of it, and of course we're in the middle of a very important season, the silage season, with lots of activity. But earlier this week, the Irish Community Air Ambulance and Macra and Fermie launched a joint campaign to all rural communities to exercise care and activity in rural Ireland increased during the summer months. And of course they have a fantastic service based out of Mill Street in Cork. And to discuss this, I want to talk to a man who knows it firsthand about serious farm accidents. It happened last May on a farm in Capriquin, and earlier I got a chance to talk to Alan O'Connor, whose son was involved in a serious accident. First of all, Alan, thanks for coming on the programme.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kieran. I'm delighted to come along when you mention anything to do with the air ambulance rescue teams.
Alan, the 24th of May last year in Capriquin is a day you and your family will never forget.
No, it was a normal sunny Saturday morning, and everything was going well, and Glyn, my son, went off to work. I was delighted to see him go away to work, and then that afternoon I got a telephone call, and there had been an accident on the farm.
Now, as you say, it was a normal day. They were actually picking stones, which is a tough job, but himself and some of his cohorts and friends were out picking stones on a farm, which looked a simple enough task.
Yeah, it was, we've all done it, grew up in farm myself, so it was just literally walking along, picking stones, throwing them into the front loader of the tractor. You don't see the dangers growing up in the farm, but now looking back, I know it was obviously a near fatal day for Glyn.
So it was a slip basically, and the actual tractor, the big yellow loader, rolled over him.
Yeah, Glyn has been working, must have been too close to it, slipped and tripped, and the tractor went over and crushed his whole body.
Now, we're on about this week the whole area of this Irish Community Air Ambulance, and you saw it firsthand, the importance of that. You might just talk us through the series of events from that tragic day in Capra.
We got the phone call to say Glyn had been hurt. I was a couple of miles away, and by the time I got on site, the boys who were with Glyn had been on to the 999. They rang 999 and they were transferred through, and they were able to pinpoint the coordinates because there's no GPS out in the fields. Well, there is, but the boys, the system is there at the moment. If you have your phone on you, they'll track you and they'll find where you are and pinpoint you. So by the time I got there, the ambulance was en route. My brother Niall, who's in the local fire brigade, he managed to come along with me, and he could see by how serious Glyn was on the floor. Glyn was squashed and coughing up blood, and I didn't know how bad it was, but Niall was able to call, because he's a paramedic in the fire brigade in Cappaquin. He was able to say, no, we need the air ambulance here. Important it is to get the casualty off the floor and to the nearest trauma centre.
So like the series of events there, obviously the importance of that and getting Glyn at that stage as quickly as possible to a hospital.
Yeah, it's the critical hour, the golden hour, and we were like a good hour and a half from Cork or Waterford by regular ambulance, and the paramedics, anyone medical could see how critical it was that Glyn was removed from the field and got to the A&E as quickly as possible. I was very much in the dark at that moment how bad Glyn was. Now a year on, I know all his injuries and all his operations and the whole lot, but yeah, to get Glyn removed off that field and into A&E as quickly as possible was just vital.
So the air ambulance arriving out on the farm just outside Cappaquin, getting him up there. Did you travel with him at that stage in the ambulance?
Yes, the medic came over and he said, we're a bit low on fuel, but in hindsight I know now, and we've had a few interviews on Nationwide, Glyn's case was used as a case study, how he's a success story. Glyn wouldn't be here today only for the work that these guys done, and the medic knew that Glyn was very, very critical, and he just didn't want to leave the dad on the field. He said, look, Alan, I can get you on board. The pilot said that we've enough fuel to get all of us off the ground to Cork, and we were in Cork within 13 minutes of that field, of that takeoff, and that was Glyn went into cardiac arrest going in the doors of Cork Hospital, so he wouldn't have made it in a regular ambulance.
And obviously the first 12 hours was crucial. At a period there you thought you might lose Glyn, but thankfully there's a good ending to this story, and it's a miracle really. When Glyn came back, he was confined to a wheelchair, took time to get back to school, and when I see him now up and walking, it's a pure miracle a year later.
Yeah, totally. It's everything went right for Glyn from the moment of the accident. The ambulance was there, the air ambulance got us to Cork, the whole Cork team were there. There was 15, 20 people working on him. First hour we had lost him, but they got him back, they saved him, and by midnight they came out to myself and Trassa and said, look, we're transferring him to Dublin tomorrow. There's a long year ahead of him, but we have a plan for operations, get his spine, get his back in order. So yeah, everything went well for Glyn afterwards, and there's a recovery programme for him, but initially the first, since the accident happened, that critical hour saved his life and saved his
back. And as you say, he got back to Blackwater College and got a great reception when he came back, but the support from all his friends and everybody was crucial for him.
See, all this happened in the first lockdown and there was no visits allowed to the hospital at the time, but the occupational therapist in Cork, she knew how critical it was that Glyn would get visits, so all his friends and school friends and family were able to come and visit him in Cork and take him out in his wheelchair over to Wilton Hospital, and it was all good for his mental state as well as physical. And
of course now he's up and about. You had converted the downstairs of the house for him, returning you the wheelchair. It's really a miracle.
Glyn gets physio every week outside in ring with Cian O'Connor, and Cian is just blown away with knowing his injuries, how strong he's come, how quickly he's recovered, and he's back on his feet.
Alan, and just to rewind, it's a fantastic story and great to have a happy ending to an accident on a farm. It can happen so easily, and there's guys, as I mentioned in the intro, a lot of activity happening at Silage time. What would be your advice to people out there, particularly a lot of young people getting involved in helping out on the farm this summer?
I work in the building trade, and it's just health and safety, and it's waking up to it. You know, you really can't be careful enough when you're around machinery, whether it is noisy. You know, we get too complacent, and you just can't. Put away your phones, watch what you're doing, and anyone working with a big machine, have 360 vision. You need to know where everyone who's near you, where they are. You need to know where all the people who should be standing near you, where they are, because it's big machineries and there's fatal consequences.
Well, Alan, it's great to talk to you year on. It's been a hectic year for yourself, Trass, and all the O'Connor family in Capperquin. But listen, we're delighted to see Glenn up and about, and thanks for taking time out to tell us that story, and with a happy ending, but also give us a strong message for the young people this summer as regards machinery on farm.
Thank you, Kieran.
Farmview with Kieran O'Connor on WLR.
With GlanbiaConnect.com. Thousands of products in the palm of your hand.
Farmview with Kieran O'Connor on WLR.
With GlanbiaConnect.com. Thousands of products in the palm of your hand.
And you're welcome back to part 2 of Farmview. Now, before we talk to MEP Sean Kelly about negotiators failing to strike a cap deal, let's have a look at some miles from our farming calendar. Turning to livestock marts, and isn't it great to see Ringside buyers back again this Saturday morning at Waterford Ross Mart? Cattle sales from 9:30, calf sales from 10. Dungarvan Mart, bank holiday Monday, business as usual, but don't forget that calf sales now every Monday morning starting at 10:30 with cattle sales from 11. And remember, all sales are now online at livestocklive.com. And turning to our farmer markets, country markets, this Saturday morning, Waterford Farmers Market, John Roberts Square. Also on Saturday morning, we have Tramore Farmers Market, Priest Road, Tramore. And of course on Saturday morning, Stradley Farmers Market, every Saturday morning from 10 until 1. Sunday, busy day on farmer markets. Sunday, we have Lismore Farmers Market, Castle Avenue, Lismore, running from 10 until 4. And great to have Ardmore Farmers Market, just off the beach car park, back up and running from last Sunday, running every Sunday from 11 to 3 with huge array of products on offer. Thursday, it's Dungarvan Farmers Market every Thursday morning. Part and parcel of Dungarvan every week is the Farmers Market, Grattan Square from 9 until 2. While on Friday mornings, great selection of product available at Dungarvan Country Markets at the Scouts Den in Abbeyside from 9 until 1. While in the city, every Friday, we've Waterford Farmers Market in St Olave's Hall running from 9 until 1. Now, Jerome from Shannakill House was on to remind us that Shannakill House Equestrian Centre, Kilmac, are holding their very first pony show jumping day on Bank Holiday Monday next. So great excitement for next Monday down in Shannakill, Monday the 7th, starting at 11 o'clock on Monday morning with newcomers and running all the way up throughout Monday up to 148 and 120 centimetres. So best of luck to all in Kilmac on Monday.
Farmview with Kieran O'Connor on WLR.
With GlanbiaConnect.com. Ireland's biggest online farming shop and more.
Well, the CAP deal, or the Common Agricultural Deal, a policy deal, is off the table. That's despite 3 days of talk that lasted well into the early hours of Friday morning, where negotiators have been unable to strike a CAP deal. So Irish farmers will have to wait at least another month for an agreement on the CAP. And joining us on the line is a man with his fingers very much on the pulse, and that's our Munster MEP, Sean Kelly. Sean, welcome back to our programme.
Thank you very much, Kieran. Nice to meet you again.
As I said in the intro, 3 days of talks right into the early hours of Friday morning, but unfortunately unable to strike CAP deal. Are you surprised at this?
Not totally, because the nature of these negotiations go down to the wire. There's a lot of grandstanding. Parliament has its position, Council has its position, no one wants to budge. So the stakes are very high because the money involved is pretty big. So they want to get their pound of flesh. So this is really part of what happens in negotiations at European level. But eventually, when they'll come back, I think they will strike a deal, and they will strike it definitely before the end of June,
right,
because the Portuguese presidency ends then, and they won't want it to be said that they failed to get it across the line. So I would expect what will happen now is the sticky issues, Parliament will meet separately to the Council. They will see how far they can go to compromise. And probably what happened in this occasion is that the Council probably weren't willing to go any further than they had designed initially, and now they probably have to go back to the table to see can they reach a deal and compromise a little further.
Now, as regards the next steps, will the farm ministers, the meeting of farm ministers, will they be involved? I know you mentioned European Council, European Parliament, European Commission. The role of the farm ministers in the next step?
Mainly, they will have to meet in advance and to see how far they're prepared to go to meet Parliament's demand. demands. And then it will go back then to those who are part of dialogue, Portuguese, the government representing the farm ministers, and then the negotiators on behalf of the Parliament, and of course the Commission as well. So eventually it will come back to those who were dealing with it last week.
Right.
And of course the ministers will have been toing and froing. We'll be in touch also with MEPs to see what's the story and how can they actually eventually get it over the line, which they have to, because if they don't, the whole thing collapses, and nobody wants that.
The last cap budget, Sean, was in around the 58 billion, a huge sum of money. I think it made up 39, almost 40% of the overall EU budget. What type of budget are we talking about here, and what type of percentage of the overall are we talking about in this round?
Well, it's a lot better than it was 2 or 3 years ago or 4 years ago when the first figures came out, when there was going to be anything up to 15% reduction. Then by negotiating and making their case very strongly, the farmers' representatives got that increased. So now we're back to more or less the same figures, essentially, especially if we get good co-financing at a national level. So in the overall figure, it's much the same as the last time, which it would want to be, because obviously there are, as you pointed out, there are huge demands now and extra demands, especially in the environmental area, which will be costly and often don't give rewards financially, and that will have to be looked at. So hopefully that they will reach a deal that can satisfy farmers generally, because I think farmers generally want to do what's right for the environment, but obviously they have to make a living at the same time. Yeah. So getting those two right is the key.
As someone mentioned, I think over the last number of weeks, from an Irish point of view, a farmer's point of view, you literally have to do more to get less, but that's literally the environment we're in with the whole greening and climate change. And when you think of the Common Agricultural Policy, Sean, set up back in the early 60s to support livelihood of farmers, improve agricultural productivity, ensure a stable supply of affordable food, where do you feel the role of it? Has it become more and more important, or where do you see the role of that Common Agricultural Policy now as we hit into 2021, 2022?
Well, it is more important perhaps now than ever, but obviously the emphasis is no longer just on supplying affordable food. The emphasis now is on doing it sustainably. So the environment has come very much into the right thing. That's understandable, because emissions have to be reduced worldwide in every single sector, and I think that the farmers realise that themselves. They're not looking for a free pass, but they do want to get help, right, and also get rewarded for the measures they will have to take, which I'm quite sure they will. But there are a lot of opportunities as well which could help substantially in reducing emissions and helping the environment if they are properly financed and supported. And there are huge opportunities, for instance, to create renewable energy on farms, where you could have solar panels on sheds, etc. But that again creates an opportunity for governments to put in place the legislation that's necessary. And often that isn't happening, so that farmers could find themselves investing in solar panels without an opportunity to sell it back to the grid, which is what we wanted and which I was involved in myself, the new energy directive, to allow to happen. The same applies to anaerobic digesters. They have a tremendous role to play, but again, they must be helped by proper measures, including feed-in tariffs, etc., which compensate for what's involved. But again, there are measures which would help. And you could have one of those nearly in every parish if the will is right. So I think, and then of course you have the other point here, which has been highlighted, especially in recent years, the farms generally, be it the soils or the trees or the hedgerows, act as a carbon sink, and that actually hasn't been quantified yet. Yeah. So there's a gain there for the environment, which farmers haven't really ever been given credit for. It's only being really recognised now, but of course it has to be quantified, and then when that's quantified, that again will change the balance somewhat in relation to what people say what's happening generally.
Now, the eco schemes are very much key and part of this to contribute to the climate change, protection of biodiversity, improve animal health and welfare. So these 4 planks, these really have become key. And are these the areas that are causing difficulty in getting an agreement?
Well, no, I think one of the big areas that's causing difficulty is the whole question of convergence. Parliament has actually looked for 100% convergence. That's something we in Ireland wouldn't want. So that's a sticking point. Where they will land with that is a huge area. But of course, we are right about eco schemes and so forth. They're very important. But again, we must accept that the principles behind these are absolutely correct. I mean, we have to have the water quality to the highest standards, and you can't have practices that impacts negatively on water quality. That's just not acceptable. We have to have soil of the highest quality, and indeed it has been proven, especially by research by Tagus, that the the better quality and the better health your soil is in, the greater profit you'll make. So there are a lot of things I think that need to be worked out, and they don't have to be necessarily a drain on farming all the time. There are goodwill on both sides, and if particularly there are good supports put in place, we can meet, I think, both targets of sustainably produced, affordable food and also reducing emissions from agriculture overall.
Now, the national herd, and really I was surprised with the stat that I've only picked up over the last week or so, Sean, is that back in 83, our national herd was 1.5 million. In 2021, it's similar. So it's just that the cows have become more efficient, the breeding has become better, the soil nutrition has become better, the husbandry has become better. So overall, farm management, and while a lot of people are jumping up and down on this one, I think it's an area people misunderstand, and plus the huge work going on with ASAP, with the water quality, with soil nutrition and breeding and biodiversity. So farmers are tuning in and doing a lot to it, but the national herd is back where it was in 1983, 1.5 million.
Yeah, and that's a significant figure. Now, I think one of the points that it should be made in relation to Ireland is, okay, it's there, but we shouldn't have a policy of rampant expansion into the future, because that would drive up emissions. Now, that was needed after the recession, and agriculture played a role in getting us out of the recession and get the economy going again. We're in a different environment now. So while we don't want to curtail people's opportunity to make a living, at the same time, a national policy of rampant expansion of the dairy herd in particular would not be acceptable now. And I think that's something that has to be recognised. We are probably reaching a peak, as you said, similar to what we had many years ago, but obviously far more efficient now. And I think once that's established, that will be very important, because otherwise, if emissions were to go up, then eventually we'll be told that we'd have to reduce herd numbers, and that wouldn't be acceptable at all, because then there'd be an almighty row who's going to have to reduce their herd numbers and who's going to be able to maintain them and increase them. So we want to avoid that. I think by first of all, getting the cap agreed at European level, and then enough flexibility for the Irish government and indeed for the other governments to look at what's required within their own area to work out the details. I think that will be very important, because then you'll be able to look at it, what's the best for Ireland, as opposed to having one rule applying all across the European Union, which could be a disaster.
Well, as I said in the intro, the negotiators with the Common Agricultural Policy unable to strike a deal, but you're quite confident, Sean, next time around in about 4 weeks' time, that we can have a Common Agricultural Policy agreed on, number one, and secondly, that it's a case of each individual government then doing their piece to ensure a good future for the farming and agri sector. Sean Kelly, MEP. Once again, Sean, as always, thanks for taking our call. I'm sure we'll hear from you over the next few weeks.
Anytime, Kieran. Best of luck. Thank you very much.
And before I go on the racing front, we had a great week again for local Waterford connections cross-channel at Brighton. Great to see Dungarvan jock Trevor Whelan having his first winner since his return to the UK, while Kappa jock Tom Quealy made it a double for Waterford connections at Brighton, and Tom went on to follow up with a fine win at Kempton Park. At Limerick, we had wins for Tom's brother, trainer jockey Declan Quealy of Kappa, of course, and a fine double for Henry de Bromhead. While at Punchestown, we had great win for Dungarvan owner-trainer combination of Miriam and John Quealy, as well as Knockeen trainer Henry de Bromhead. While at Wexford, we had wins for Kappa trainer and jockey Declan Quealy back in the winners' enclosure again, and also a win for Henry de Bromhead, while Tallaght trainer Sean Ahern rounded off a great day for the Dacia at Wexford with a nice win as well. While at our final point-to-point of the season last weekend, we'd wins for Butlerstown trainer and jockey Paul Power, as well as Waterford owner trainer John Halley and Strably jock David Kiley. Well, that's my lot for this week's programme, so for myself, Kieran O'Connor, it's goodbye for now. Once again, my thanks to Sean and Ollie for all their help in putting this week's programme together. So stay safe, keep up the protocol, and hopefully I'll have your company again same time next week.
Farmview with Kieran O'Connor on WLR.
With GlanbiaConnect.com. Thousands of products in the palm of your hand.